This is the Project Management Podcast. We bring project management to beginners and experts. Find us on the web at pm-podcast.com or send your emails to info@pm-podcast.com. Hello and welcome to episode number 156. I am Cornelius Fichtner. This is the Project Management Podcast. Nice to have you with us. If you have heard Peter Taylor speak about productively lazy project management, then you may remember that projects are thick at the beginning, thin in the middle, and then again thick at the end. But does this hold true for project communications as well? After all, we communicate anywhere from 70 to 90% of our time as a project manager. So that should really mean that in regards to project communications, a project is thick at the beginning, thick in the middle, and thick at the end again. Or is there a special secret that allows you to have productively lazy project communications? Peter Taylor says yes, but it's not a secret. It's simply how you approach things. Today's episode of the Project Management Podcast is sponsored by the Project Management Congress 2010 in Munich, better known as the PM Summit 2010. It takes place on November 15th, 2010 and offers 5 presentation tracks with over 35 presentations on topics like agile versus classic project management, soft skills, as well as requirements, team leadership and knowledge management. The keynote speaker is better known as the Lazy Project Manager. Can you guess who it is? If you cannot guess, then simply listen to the interview that's going to follow and then stop by at pm-summit.de, that's pm-summit.de for more info. And now, without further ado, sit back, get lazy, and enjoy the interview.
The Project Management Podcasts feature interview. Today with Peter Taylor, PMO Director at Siemens PLM Software.
Hello, Peter. Welcome back to the Project Management Podcast.
Thank you. Hello again.
Hey, tell me, you call yourself the Lazy Project Manager, but I noticed you are traveling a lot around the world, various speaking engagements, PMI congresses, PMI gatherings. There's nothing lazy about that. All that traveling. What's up with that?
It's actually, this is close to my favorite question. A lot of people at the end of my presentation say, wow, you're doing so much. You know, you have a full-time job with Siemens, running the PMO, you've written a book, you're writing another book, you're doing a blogs. How do you do it? And I just turn around and say, well, you know, it must work. The Lazy Project Manager, the art of productive laziness, it must work because I can do this. I mean, yeah, part of it is being organized, is being structured. Part of it is, you know, I am blessed, if you like, in having a job that it doesn't really matter where I am in the world, the job can still be done to a greater extent. And you know, this is as much my hobby as anything else. I love doing it.
All right. One of your next upcoming speaking engagements is at the PMI Summit 2010 in Munich. And it is titled Clever Achievement of Milestones. And frankly, it sounds much better in the German original. Now, that, you know, clever achievement of milestones, doing it cleverly, it sounds completely and right up your alley. Is that so?
Oh, yeah, definitely. I was really looking forward to this one because for whatever reason, the Lazy Project Manager is very popular in Germany, which is great. And this title, as you say, the clever achievement of milestones, it is the essence of what I talk about, which is, you know, achieving those milestones in the most effective manner. It's working smarter, not necessarily harder. I'm just looking forward to it. I think it's going to be right on tune with everything else that goes on in that conference.
When exactly are you going to be speaking, and what will you be talking about?
Well, I'm speaking. It's on the 15th of November this year in Munich, and I will be speaking about the art of productive laziness.
And what will people learn from the keynote?
What I'm trying to convey to people is the essence of the approach. How to be a little bit more lazy in what they do. So I'll be touching on some of the topics that are actually in the conference itself. A little bit of agile working. How the PMO can help. And I'll also be picking up on the if you like the key themes of the Lazy Project Manager, which is the foundations of the project, how to work smart at the early part of the project to have a good foundation to be successful. What to do in the middle when you're hopefully being a lazy project manager and sitting back in a comfy chair a little bit, and certainly what to do at the end of a project, that whole process of lessons learned and the huge value there is in that activity.
Okay, we don't want to give away your PM Summit 2010 keynote presentation here. That's why we are going to concentrate the rest of our discussion here on lazy project communication, is what I've titled it. So let me start out with this question here. Communication. Communication is one of the most important activities that we have on a project. If you forget to communicate one key point to your team members, you might be out of luck with the complete project. So how can we possibly be lazy in how we communicate?
You're absolutely right. If you do fail to communicate that one key point, you can be in trouble. Now, depending on what you read, it's anything from 70 to 80%, perhaps more, of a project manager's time is actually spent in some form of communication. Right. So what a great place to try and be more productively lazy. So I'm not saying that you should do bad communication. I'm just saying you perhaps can do less communication, but you can do it in a more effective way. It's just it's not, it's putting in the right effort in the right area, and you need to communicate those key points for sure. But there's probably a whole bunch of communication that isn't critical to the project and could perhaps be done in a different way, in a more summarized way.
Okay. Let's take a look at this through your book, The Lazy Project Manager, because in this you offer some quick tips, and one of them reads as follows. Avoid communication breakdown through an open and honest, effective communication process that suits each individual. This doesn't sound really lazy at all. Once again, this sounds like a lot of work, right? So let's take a look at how exactly you do this. How do you personally create this kind of process in a productively lazy way?
So this I really pick up on. A lot of the work I do within the PMO is looking at projects, obviously, to see the state of them. We do health checks. And one of the things we often noticed and still do notice is that, everybody's very good at the beginning of a project in creating a communications plan as part of the whole PMP, project management plan. So that's great. But it's a point in time. It's right at the beginning of the project. And what we often see is that communication plan just doesn't develop at all. It's never looked at again. It's rigid. It doesn't change. So what I suggest in communication is that you want to be effective in your communication plan. And perhaps an example of this is that when you start a project and you sit down with your project sponsor for the first time, you may come to an agreement. The sponsor may say, well, let's sit down for 2 hours on a Friday between 3 and 5. And we love those meetings when it happened on a Friday between 3 and 5. Let's do that. Now, okay, that's probably right at the beginning of a project. But actually, when the project is moving along, when you've got a good relationship, do you really still need to sit down for 2 hours every Friday? I would suggest not. So start with an effective approach to communication, and then become efficient in the way you communicate and adapt it.
Okay. How do you document and communicate your project management communications plan? Is there any specifically lazy way in which you do it, or do you just, you have a template and you fill it in?
Yeah, we use a template and we fill it in, and that's great. I'm just saying to people that don't leave it there. Validate it and consider what information is flowing. I mean, and communication is all about imparting information and learning information, so you can act upon it. So consider what you're communicating, and don't oversupply data. I mean, we have huge amounts of data these days moving around, even just inside one project. There's huge amounts of data. Now, does everybody need to know absolutely everything? Absolutely not. Focus that and tailor that communication, that data flow to and from the individuals. Now, that might perhaps feel like it is a greater burden that you're actually not working lazy at all, but I don't believe it is. I believe if it's done properly, it has a knock-on effect of being a very efficient way of communicating.
Yeah, I was just going to say, does this also speak to there are three adjectives in the quick tip: open, honest, and effective. Does this, what you just said, also address sort of how you make it effective by tailoring it?
Yes, it is. I mean, I do advocate being open. I know there's always perhaps some political situations where you were just a little bit, shall we say, calmer with the honesty. But, generally speaking, in the project team, open, honest, it really helps break those barriers down and progress the project. Being effective, yeah, it's exactly that. It's telling people what they need to know and not nothing else, but not absolutely everything else. If, some person in the project needs a particular key piece of information to progress something, to move something forward, that's what they need to be told. And the other thing I would say is, as a project manager, don't forget yourselves, because you're at the center of all this. So you really need to explain to people what information you need, what quality level you need that information at, when, how you need it, what form you need it, and what you're going to do with it, so that everybody is communicating in a very effective and tight manner.
Mm-hmm. You also said make sure that the communication suits each individual. So how do you ensure that you communicate the information in such a way that, it suits the person whom you're talking to, and you're still trying to be lazy? Because after all, let's assume I have 20 stakeholders on the project and I have to communicate to each and every one of them. Well, there's nothing lazy about, tailoring the message to each one of them.
You're right, but let's perhaps look at it the other way around. So let's say you understand every piece of information that is required by every single stakeholder, and you compile that into a beautiful 16-page report that you produce every week. Yeah. Now, we all know that reporting is not communicating. So the consequences are, everybody has the information they need to do whatever they need to do or make the decisions they need. But actually, nobody's going to make any real decisions or progress the project at all, because they're just not going to read it particularly well. There are a few people who like reading those sort of things. But in general, you're going to be creating more work for yourself, because the phone's going to ring, the email's going to go, people are going to misunderstand. So by not doing this tailored and effective communication, you are effectively creating work for yourself. I think that's the downside to it. Mm-hmm. Now, the other way around, how do you actually, adapt and suit each individual? Well, you just learn that, I think, moving through the process, and just not being blind to the fact that, as I said, at the beginning of the project, maybe you needed a 2-hour meeting. You don't need one now. It may be that your project sponsor is now very happy for you to actually summarize an email or a quick phone call that will bring them up to speed, and vary it. There will be times when that's fine, and maybe when there's a bit of a problem you're going through, maybe you need to go back to a 2-hour meeting just to step the stakeholder through that.
Okay. And what do you personally do if you notice, okay, it seems to me that communication on this project is breaking down? Where do you begin?
You kind of got to go back to the source of where you believe that the problem is. I mean, if the whole project team are misunderstanding things, sadly it might be that you're the source. So there you need to start looking at how you're doing things. But if there's a misunderstanding in one particular area, or one of the sub project teams example, you got to understand the process of communication. So the communication leaves yourself, it moves forward to another individual. We all understand about the fact that there are problems with that, even that process, whether it be written or verbal. There's interference, there's confusion, there's misunderstanding. So you need to look at that that step in it and say, well, okay, there's a misunderstanding occurred. Now, did that happen because the communication was rushed, because there wasn't enough information, because that person doesn't like receiving that information that certain way? Maybe verbal doesn't work for some people. Maybe written is better. You kind of need to find the source of where the communication is going wrong, and analyze the communication process itself and see, is there a way of reinforcing it, of improving that information flow, and just monitor it. Next time around, is everything that much clearer?
Mm-hmm. But, please remind me once again, what exactly is lazy about all of this? Because everything that we've talked about, say, in the last 5-10 minutes, it sounds like a lot of work.
And it is, to begin with. I think, you have to put the effort in at the front end of the project. I talk freely about that the thick front end of a project, as I describe it, is all about setting the foundations so that things can be more efficient moving forward. So you put the effort in to begin with, and then you put the effort in to monitor how it's going, and you adapt. But I truly believe, and I've seen this work on my own projects and other people's projects, that by taking that approach, the end result, the cumulative amount of communication effort you have to put in actually reduces because less errors occur, less confusion occurs in the communication. People understand things more in a quicker way, and you will benefit from that. You and your project will benefit from it.
Mm-hmm. In your book, you also put a lot of focus on sponsor management. So let me ask you this. How do you personally approach sponsor management in a productively lazy way? How do you do it?
Again, I think you've got to get behind the sponsor that you've inherited. I always joke in the presentations that we don't get to choose our project sponsors. The project sponsors are there, and we have to work with them. So it's all linked to communication as well, of actually knowing and understanding as much as you can about your project sponsor. Now, some people are blessed. They live in organizations where they see the same project sponsors come around over and over again, and there's an appreciation of, is this a good project sponsor? Is this a bad project sponsor, or whatever? And you can adapt your style accordingly. But if you don't know that project sponsor, and maybe you're having your very first meeting, you've got to get behind the project, and you've got to find out more about the person. I talk in my book about the story of where I completely misunderstood the history of this particular sponsor. I believe they were just non-supportive and awkward. And the reality was it just had a very bad experience on a previous project that I just didn't find out about. So one of the things I tell people, that very first meeting you have with a project sponsor, ask them a couple of questions and ask them very open questions. Ask them, what are their hopes for the project and what are their fears about the project? Because that way you'll find out a lot more than just saying, okay, when do you need me to deliver this and what's the budget?
Cool. To close our interview, let's try and help our listeners out there to be more productively lazy in their communication. Starting right now, obviously, because many of them may be listening to this as they are driving to work. And so when they arrive at the office, what 2 to 3 action items can you give to them right now so that when they get there, they can start to be productively lazy in their ongoing projects?
I encourage people all the time to once they finish listening to this podcast is just to give themselves some reflective time. Just think about the day ahead. I think if people do this and maybe reflect back on the previous working day, they will understand and realize that there were 1 or 2 things that they did that really moved things forward, gave the project the most momentum, the highest return on investment of their time. We've all got huge lists of to-do lists and items and actions, things we get in the office, and we get invited to other meetings and all that great stuff. But if you can be a little bit more focused and think, okay, what's the biggie? What's the one thing I should do today that I'm going to feel good at the end of the day if I manage to achieve it or even get it moving? So I'd say that's the first thing. Do a little bit of reflective planning on the day. The second thing, I'm going to go back to communication plan here. Just, print that out, that communication plan, or open it up on the screen and just take a look at it and think, is there a way I can reduce one of those meetings or improve the communication to this particular person? Take that as a task to do, while you're having your coffee. And then finally, just try this one out, because in communication, I do go on a lot about email, which is a wonderful invention and also the bane of many people's lives. Try this. Just look at your emails in your inbox and just delegate one of those emails that you believe is actually something you've got to do. Delegate it to one of your project team members. Be responsible about this. Don't just pick someone who can possibly respond. But just try it out. See how that delegation works and resist getting involved directly yourself. And just see what happens. I bet you find that actually that's a path towards improving your effective communication by beginning to focus the team on the things they need to do and removing yourself unnecessarily from communication flows.
Wonderful. There you have it. Reflect, review the project management plan, project management communication plan, and delegate. Once again, those of you who would like to hear Peter speak, you can do so at the PM Summit 2010 in Munich. And this takes place on November 15th, 2010, when Peter is giving the keynote address. You can find out more about this at www.pm-summit.de. Again, that's pm-summit.de, and you can find all the details there. Peter, thank you so much for being on the program today.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you.
And that was our interview with Peter Taylor on productively lazy project communications. That's it for today. Thank you very much for listening. As always, you can find us on the web at pm-summit.de. pm-podcast.com. If you are a project manager who wants to become a PMP, then the easiest way to do so is with our sister podcast, the Project Management Prepcast, and study for the exam by watching over 38 hours of video training from pm-prepcast.com. Please send your emails to info@pm-podcast.com, and when you write, please tell me where in the world you are writing from. And finally, we have this. We know that communication is a problem, but the company is not going to discuss it with the employees. Until next time. Peter, before I let you go, let me ask you this. What was the most interesting project that you have ever worked on?
Yeah, thank you. I think that there are so many projects that have aspects of interest about them, and yeah. But the one I'm going to pick on, I think, is the one that I was told wasn't a project, and actually was getting married. It's not easy to disconnect yourself from what you do work-wise when you're a project manager, and actually planning a wedding. I approached in a project management style. Because there was lots to do, lots to organise, the event, the catering, the guest list, the seating plan, lots and lots of things there. And I say it's the most interesting project I worked on because obviously it ended up with the great day where I got married, and I was given some superb advice right towards the end by a senior project manager I was working with, because he said, "You're doing a great job. I can just tell you're doing a great job, and it's going to be a superb event." I said, "I tell you what, can you stop being a project manager, let's say 1 week before the wedding, and turn into a husband to be?" And that was some great advice, and I had a superb day. And I have to admit, we went over budget.
And I guess your primary sponsor was?
My lady wife, to be.
I assume so.